that a particular personality is descending. So when we talk about the avatars of Krishna, actually they're all the same personality, because there's only one supreme absolute source. But the other avatars, so many avatars, they're the same personality. And now, in Gaur Lila, in Krishna Lila, Krishna does not descend here alone. He does not come alone. He comes with all of his associates from Goloka Vrindavan when Krishna descends. All are descending with him. All the paraphernalia, all the forests that are in the spiritual world, 12 forests, they're all descending. So, they descend in Krishna Lila, and that's their original identity, but they also have identities in Gaur Lila. Because in Goloka Vrindavan, there are two different sides. There are two different partitions, or what do you call it, sections of Braj, the inner whorl of the lotus flower of Krishna's eternal supreme abode, Goloka Vrindavan. The inner whorl has two sections of Leelas going on eternally, simultaneously. One side is Krishna Lila, and one side is Gaur Lila. So Gaur Lila is going on eternally in Goloka Vrindavan as well. And according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, he's also telling that those who are very much attached to Krishna Lila in their perfected stage, they can have their identity there in Goloka, in Krishna Lila. Those who are more attached to Gaur Lila, they can have their eternal spiritual form there in Gaur Lila. Those who are attached to both equally, they can have two separate forms simultaneously. You heard this before? Yes. They can have two separate forms, one in Krishna Lila, eternally, one in Gaur Lila. And this is a very astonishing thing. But actually, the jivas are able to have many forms when they're eternally perfected. They're able to have many forms. There's many pramans for this, so much evidence. So the eternal associates of the Lord, they also descend into this world. And that's why Sri Kavi Karnapur, the son of Shivananda Singh, who wrote the book called Gaur Ganodesh Deepika. Gaur Ganodesh Deepika means shining a light on the identities of the Gaur Gana. The Gaur Gana means the associates, all the associates of Gaur. So shining a light. And what he did there was he revealed the eternal identities of the associates of Gaur Lila, Lord Chaitanya, and who they are in their Krishna Lila. So Gaur Lila and Krishna Lila, Gaur Dham and Vrindavan Dham, they're identical abodes actually. This is the realization that the eternal associates of Mahaprabhu and all those in the line of Rupa Goswami, they have realized and understood this truth, this principle, that Navadvip Dham, Gaur Dham, and the same personalities are appearing in the Gaur Lila as who appear in the Krishna Lila. But there's something very significant about Gaur Lila for us. Yesterday we were reading Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. I didn't finish it, but I finished it on my own last night. Very astonishing what he's telling, how he's how he is expressing all these truths. Narottam, you can't talk in the class.
Or run in here like that.
You cannot do that. Yes. So, this song of Narottam Das Thakur, this song we can sing every single day, because it is not in vain when we call the names of the Lord's eternal associates, when we call the names of the perfected souls. They're not like conditioned souls. They are fully conscious. They're perfected. They can hear. They can hear your prayers. That's why we say Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad, like this, when we say the names of all of our Guru Parampara, because Nitya Lila, no texting.
Oh, I'm arranging dinner cooking. I was going to offer to cook for Jagavinda, but I don't want to interrupt the class to do it, so that's why I just texted. Maybe I'll show you the text. That's it. I apologize for that.
Okay.
But it's for Seva, I won't.
Doesn't matter. This is the seva right now. That's not the seva. He's texting you a message what you're supposed to cook.
No, I asked him if he wanted me to cook tonight.
If he wanted you to cook.
To give him a night off, since I'm only here for a few days.
It's okay to get up.
He's already here.
I texted that to him right before he got here, so that's why I just told him, never mind, he's here.
But you know what's needed?
I was paying attention.
You know what's needed?
You said we could sing this song every
It's
day.
needed that you're here in this class.
Yeah.
That's very much needed.
Yes.
By me.
Well, I'm sorry to let you down, Mara. Have a good evening. I can't take any snacks like that.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Let's finish our kirtan, and then we'll begin discussing Raghunandan Thakur and Vamshidas Babaji Maharaj. So much nectar about their lives, which I wish that he would be here to hear, but unfortunately, he's not. So, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Advaita Gadadhar ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणम्। पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदनाय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरातिशे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो Dinabandho Jagatapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali to the lotus feet of my most beloved, worshipable Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Padi Balbatirtha Goswami Maharaj's presentation of their lives. Some of the pastimes are overlapping, but I decided to read from Srila Bhakti Balbatirtha Maharaj. It's a bit more thorough.
I'm putting a little bit more volume.
What?
I'm putting a little bit more volume.
Yeah, okay. Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So, now I'm reading from his book, The Associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah, so this personality's name, he's one of the eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Raghunandan Thakur. So he begins by quoting the verse from the Gaur Ganodesha Deepika, as I mentioned before, Srila Kavi Karnapur's book, telling of the identities of the eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What is their identity in Krishna Lila? So here he says, Vyuhas Tritiya Pradyumna Priya Narma Sako Bhavat Chakre Lila Sahayam Yo Radha Madhavayor Vraje Shri Chaitanya Advaita Tanu Sa Eva Raghunandanaha. So the translation is, the third member of the Chatur Vyuha, Pradyumna, took part in Radha Madhava's Leela in Braja as Krishna's intimate friend, or Priya Narma Saka. He has now appeared as Raghunandan, whose body is non-different from that of Chaitanya. So, what is the Chatur Vyuha? A little bit of a review on what we've been hearing from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chatur means four, and Vyuha means expansions. So, who are the Chatur Vyuha?
Vasudeva, Aniruddha,
Is that the right order though? Or is it
No, usually Vasudev,
Vasudeva?
Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Because Vasudeva is Krishna, Sankarshan is Baladev.
And then it's Pradyumna, then Aniruddha, or Aniruddha?
Pradyumna, Aniruddha. So, these are the original 4 expansions of Godhead with the Vishnu forms. And they are present within Krishna at all times. Everything is present within Krishna. Whatever is outside, apparently outside of Krishna's body, is actually inside him also, simultaneously. And whatever expansions he has, they are always eternally present within him. That is why in the Krishna Lila, when Krishna comes, certain functions are performed by his expansions. His expansion particularly is Vasudev expansion. So the Vasudev expansion of Krishna is Vishnu form in the Chaturvyuha. Vasudev is Krishna's expansion in the Chaturvyuha. Sankarshan is Baladev's expansion in the Chaturvyuha. Where does the Chaturvyuha first manifest? In Dwarka. In Dwarka is the first Chaturvyuha. Those personalities, those 4 personalities, are present in Dwarka Lila. Pradyumna is who? The son of Krishna, Aniruddha. Okay, so they're there with the same name. But they show, in Dwarka Lila, they show 2 arms. But they are the original, the Mool, like Mool Sankarshan, Baladev. Mool means the root. Mool Sankarshan. So that Chaturvyuha is also there. They're called the, forgetting the name. I'll remember after. So that Chaturvyuha, those 4 personalities, then they expand themselves in Vaikuntha. And they have only 4 arms, no 2-arm forms in Vaikuntha. And from those 4, I'm explaining what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself explained to Sanatana Goswami. Very detailed, Mahaprabhu explained this. Those 4 personalities are the source from which all the other forms of Vishnu, who occupy all the infinite number of Vaikuntha planets, infinite, there's not a limit to their number. So those infinite Vaikuntha planets, those 4 original Chaturvyuha, they expand themselves into Vishnu forms everywhere. And from that Sankarshan form, we were reviewing this before, that is where the incarnations were called the Purushas. The Purushas of the material world, the 3 expansions of Vishnu, Mahavishnu, Karandakshay Vishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kiradakshay Vishnu. So, and most of the avatars that come into the material world, they come through the medium of Kiradakshay Vishnu. They come through the medium of Kiradakshay Vishnu. That is why, when Lord Brahma was approached by Bhumi Devi, at the beginning of the 10th canto, and she had tears in her eyes and she took the form of a cow. And she was lamenting to Lord Brahma that I cannot tolerate the demoniac military forces because they were becoming so powerful on the earth planet. Kamsa and all of his allies, Jarasandha, so many. And then Lord Brahma, in a mystic transmission, he sat in meditation along with the other demigods. They approached the shore of the ocean of milk in our universe. So Lord Brahma is able to do that. He can have a direct exchange through mystic transmission with Lord Vishnu. And that form of Vishnu is Hiradaksha Vishnu, who also expands himself into every atomic particle and into every heart of every jiva, of every jiva soul. So, the other forms of the Lord in the Chaturvyuha, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and so forth, they also appeared in Krishna Lila. They took identities in Krishna Lila. So, in Dwarka Lila, Pradyumna became the son of Krishna in Dwarka Lila. But in Gaur Lila, he became this personality, Raghunandan Thakur. The third member of the Chaturvyuha, it says here, in the verse. Pradyumna took part in Radha Madhava's Leela in Vraja as Krishna's intimate friend or Priya Narmasaka. So in Vraja, Pradyumna, who took part in Radha Madhava's Leela in Vraja, is Krishna's intimate friend or Priya Narmasaka. Has a cowherd boy.
What's his name?
It's not telling here in this verse.
But he's a Srila.
Yeah. So that same personality, Pradyumna, who's the third member of the Chaturvyuha, he's also existing eternally in Radha Madhava, Radha Krishna's Leela in Braj, as Krishna's intimate friend, Priyanarmasaka. And he has now appeared as Raghunandan in Gauri, whose body is not different from that of Chaitanya. So that's the verse which begins this explanation here. Now, Raghunandan's father, Mukunda Das. Raghunandan was born into a family of physicians in the year 1510 AD, like Western calendar. His father's name was Mukunda Das, and his mother's name is unknown. So Mukunda Das was Narahari Sarkar Thakur's older brother. So when we sing Narahari Adhikari Chamara Dulai, that's the father of Raghunandan, the older brother of the father of Raghunandan. So Mukunda Das, he's all very intimate associate of Mahaprabhu. So in the 15th chapter of the Madhya Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is clearly said that Mukunda Das was physician to the king in Gaur Leela, the Muslim king. Now here's the quotation from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, externally, he appears to be a physician to the king who is engaged in government service. But internally, he is filled with divine love. Who would be able to know his love? So there's a little incident now described here. What happened one day when Mukunda was, fanning the king. He was treating the king because he was a physician, okay? So he was giving a treatment to the king, and while he was treating the king, he saw a peacock feather, and he fainted. So, sometimes it's described that someone was fanning, and he saw peacock feathers in the fan. So we can move the chair over here.
Oh yeah.
So, now, Mukunda, he was externally like a physician, okay? A doctor. And he was treating the king. He was a physician to the king. So one day, when he was treating the king, and he saw a peacock feather, and he suddenly fainted. This incident is also described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. His home, so what's the point here? He's not going on from here. The point is that he immediately became reminded of Krishna Lila, and he was such a great devotee that just by seeing the peacock feather, it acted as what we call udipan, stimulus for his ecstatic love. Actually, this is also cited in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He's also cited this incident of how the stimulus, just by seeing Krishna's peacock feather, he went into a very deep trance of praying and he fainted. Now, his home was in Sri Khanda. It is a village in the Bardhaman district. So, on the Katha Burdwan rail line, the first station west of Katha is Sripat Sri Khanda, and the second is called Sri Khanda. Mukunda Das's home is about 1 mile from the Sri Khanda station. Raghunandan Thakur took birth. Okay, let me say something about this now. So, you know what is Katha? Katha is the place, the village, the town where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to take sannyas. He took sannyas there in Katha. I've been there a couple of times. Hey Nartam, no loud talking, Nartam. Who is it? Ayan Varshana. So the point is that, you know, in Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, and also we see here, that Srila Bhakti Bhagavatirtha Maharaj, they're including the very exact descriptions of where these places are. You'll find this all throughout the Adi Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita. Who is giving those descriptions? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He's giving these descriptions for that time period, but it's still applicable today because the same villages are there. A lot of the same train stations. So he's telling how you can go there and visit all these places because there's literally hundreds. They're called Shripat. Shripat means the place where some very great devotee of Mahaprabhu appeared, and that's his Shripat, his birthplace.
But Maharaj, a lot of these places weren't affected by the Ganga moving, like Navadvip and Mahaprabhu's birthplace were affected greatly by that.
Yeah.
As far as our external vision.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these places are not on the bank of the Ganga. So
they're still exactly the same.
Yeah,
spot.
the same train stations. Yeah. Well, I mean, even it floods in Navadvip,
right.
But, you know, the train station has not moved, even though it gets flooded.
Right, but there weren't trains at that time.
No, not at that time, but I'm talking about at the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Yes.
He's giving the instructions from the 1920s or something.
Yeah,
you see?
that makes sense.
How to get there,
how to go there. He's marking
the spots.
It's very interesting.
So that's why we hear on the such and such Katha Burdwan rail line, the first station west of Katha is Sri Khanda, and the second is called Sri Khanda. So, and in Gurudev's Navadvip Dham Parikrama book, he also has the final section of the book is called Gaur Mandala, visiting all the places in Gaur Mandala. Because just like we have Vrindavan in North India, the place of Krishna's pastimes, right? And then there's Mathura right near there. So sometimes that whole area is called Mathura Mandala, but we also refer to it as Vraja Mandala. and it's, what is it, 64 square miles or 80 square miles, something like that. Yeah, and so that Braj Mandala is the greater area. Similarly, when Mahaprabhu appears, he has his Navadvip Dham, okay, which are the immediate 9 islands, right? But there's also Gaura Mandala, and that's a much larger area, and many of Mahaprabhu's associates are from there. And it's very particularly important that we understand this location called Srikanda. Why? Because that particular village was full of very intimate associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who would come every year. I mean, they were present in Navadvip Dham for his householder pastimes, but after he took sannyas and then he went to Jagannath Puri, then every single year for the Ratha Yatra, these different Vaishnavas would come from these different villages. And like Srikanda is one particular village. So when Mahaprabhu organized the Sankirtan parties that were performing kirtan in 7 different parties surrounding Lord Jagannath's Ratha Yatra cart during the festival, we've heard that recently, all those pastimes. One of those kirtan parties was Srikanda. And Mukunda, this personality, the father of Raghunandan Thakur, he was one of the singers, and Raghunandan was one of the dancers, if I remember correctly. So, Mukunda Das's home is about 1 mile from the Srikanda station. There you go. You want to go there? It's 1 mile away.
So you just start walking.
You just ask anybody.
Right.
In India, you just ask, where is the Shripat of Mukunda Das?
He will take you there.
Yes. So, Raghunandan Thakur took birth on the Vasanta Panchami day, and his uncle, Narahari Sarkar, took a great deal of interest in raising Raghunandan, for whom he had much affection. So here we have the father is Mukunda, and his brother is Narahari Sarkar. And Narahari Sarkar, he's also mentioned in our evening artik. His name is mentioned there in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Gaur Artik song, where he says, Narahari Adhikari Chamara Dulai, that he was fanning Mahaprabhu in the Artik ceremony with a chamara fan. So he was the older brother of Mukunda, who was the father of Raghunandan. And he took a great deal of interest in raising Raghunandan, for whom he had much affection. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicated that one's importance increases with the depth of devotion by telling Mukunda Das that his son was really his father. Have you heard this before? You will remember probably hearing this. So here's the verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The 3 most important devotees from Srikanda were Mukunda Das, Raghunandan, and Narahari. So Mahaprabhu asked Mukunda Das one day, are you Raghunandan's father? And is he your son? Mahaprabhu asked Mukunda. Or is he your father and you are his son? Tell me, so that I can put my doubts to rest. Then Mukunda answered, Raghunandan is my father, and I am his son. Rest assured, whatever devotion we have comes from him. Therefore, I see him as my father. Understand? The father is telling Mahaprabhu actually, because Mahaprabhu is asking a cryptic question here. Are you his father, or is he your father? He says, yes, he's my father. Why? This is to be analyzed very carefully, because it depends on who has the devotion and from whom the devotion, bhakti, is coming. So he said, whatever devotion we have comes from him, therefore I see him as my father. And when Mahaprabhu heard Mukunda Das's answer, he was thrilled, and he said, he from whom we imbibe devotion is certainly our Guru. Statement of Mahaprabhu. So this principle is the real position of Guru. Because father is also to be considered Guru in Vedic culture, one of the Gurus. But Mahaprabhu wanted to designate this.
And if someone is Guru, they are father.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, if someone is not giving devotion, then how they can be Guru? What to speak of father? So, this is one of the incidents from Raghunandan's life, one of the most well-known. So now, here's the section titled, Mahaprabhu gave Raghunandan the service of deity worship. Now, this is a very interesting pastime. The quotation here from Madhya Lila, chapter 15. Raghunandan's work is to serve Krishna. He has no interest in anything other than serving Krishna. Now, from his early childhood, Raghunandan Thakur would feed the family's Gopinath deity. He would feed ladus to the deity. Uddhava Das has written a song in which this Leela is described. So, here's the quotation from his song. Mukunda Das lived in the village of Srikanda, where his household deity was named Gopinath. One day, he had to go somewhere for work, and he called Raghunandan to do the service. So here's a small boy, and he's not trained in deity worship, but his father, Mukunda, had to go somewhere. So he told his young boy, you make the offering to Gopinath. So he said, in this house, Mukunda said to his boy, in this house we worship Krishna. So I want you to be sure to give him something to eat. And then he left. So Raghunandan did as his father had ordered, and he made the offering to the deity. Now Raghunandan was just a child. And in his simplicity, he said to Gopinath, eat, eat. Krishna is controlled by love. And so he did as the child told him and ate everything on the plate without leaving a grain of rice. When Mukunda Das returned, he asked the boy to bring him the prasad from the offering he had made. And the child answered, Father, he ate everything, and he left no remnants. Then Mukunda was astonished at his child's wonderful words that he asked him again on another occasion to make an offering. And this time, after he left the house, he returned. And he hid to watch what his son would do. Raghunandan joyfully placed the laddu in Krishna's hand, and he said in a commanding voice, eat, eat. When Krishna had eaten half of the laddu, Raghunandan saw Mukunda Das in the doorway. Mukunda saw that Krishna did not take another bite, and that the half-eaten laddu remained in his hand. So this caused him to be filled with love. He embraced his child, and as tears of joy rained from his eyes, he spoke to him in a broken voice. To this day, fortunate people come to Srikanda to see the half-eaten laddu in Gopinath's hand. That same deity is there. And every day, they put a half-eaten laddu in Gopinath's hand. So Raghunandan is non-different from Cupid himself. This is still the song written by Uddhava Das, describing this whole incident. And he's ending the song by saying that Raghunandan is non-different from Cupid himself. Why? Because Cupid is Pradyumna. Yes. And Uddhava Das says this with great feeling. So all of the Mahantas, they felt fascinated to see the Gopinath deity whom Raghunandan had fed ladus. This is a quote from the Bhakti Ratnakara. Other miraculous events. Next section. Narahari Sarkar Thakur gave mead to Nityananda Prabhu and Mahaprabhu. I don't understand what is mead.
Gave neem?
No, mead. M-E-A-D.
That's a wine.
It's a drink.
Oh, okay. Narahari Sarkar Thakur gave mead to Nityananda Prabhu and Mahaprabhu from a pond which was right next to their home. This pond became known as Madhu Pushkarani.
It's a honey mead.
The legend is told that a Kadamba tree, that you're correct, because I saw this in Srila Bharati Maharaj's. He was explaining that the actual pond became turned to honey, and he fed that. Yes. So that pond became known as Madhu, which means honey, Pushkarani. Now the legend is told that a Kadamba tree which grew right next to the pond always had 2 flowers blooming, regardless of the season, by Raghunandan's miraculous powers. According to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Abhidan, another miraculous event took place in Raghunandan's life. One day, Abhiram Thakur came to Sri Khanda and paid his obeisances to Raghunandan. Now, there's one interesting thing about Abhiram Thakur. Do you remember about Abhiram Thakur? What's his unique quality? He's one of Nityananda Prabhu's very intimate 12 associates, who are also cowherd boys in Krishna Lila. And Abhiram Thakur had a whip, an actual whip. And when Abhiram Thakur would whip someone, they would develop Krishna praying. And also, yes, Abhiram Thakur, he was so powerful that if he would pay his obeisances to a Shalagram Shila, and it was not a real Shalagram Shila, that stone, that blackish stone which looked like a Shalagram Shila, it would break into hundreds of pieces if he would pay his obeisances.
And it wasn't real.
Right. So one day, Abhiram Thakur came to Sri Khanda and paid his obeisances to Raghunandan. Then he embraced him and he melted with feelings of praying. And Raghunandan started to dance and to sing kirtan. And while doing so, one of his ankle bells slipped from his foot and went flying off, landing 4 miles away in Akai Hut, near his disciple Krishna Das's house. Later, in order to commemorate the event, a tank was excavated there, which was given the name Nupur Kunda. So Nupur means ankle bell. So this is one incident from his life when he was dancing in the kirtan in front, and Abhiram Thakur was singing, and he was also dancing. Then, as he danced, this ankle bell slipped from his foot and landed 4 miles away. So at that very place where it landed is called Nupur Kund. These are the very many miraculous places all over Bengal. All over. And there are also, like for example, Lord Nityananda. His birthplace is not even in Gaur-mandala. It's not part of Gaur-mandala. His birthplace, Ekachakra, Gram, is an outlying area called Radhadesh. Right? So it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu made many of his associates take birth in far away lands. I mean, some of them even in South India, you know. But many of them came from East Bengal, which is now called Bangladesh. And there are many, many Shripats there. Because so many, in fact, Mahaprabhu's own father, Jagannath Mishra, originally born there in East Bengal. So why did Mahaprabhu arrange this? Because to purify all these areas by the birth of very great personalities there. They all became holy tirthas. And that's why the Navadvip Parikrama is actually the end of the Gaur Mandala Parikrama. When devotees want to do the full, complete Parikrama of Gaur Mandala, then it takes at least 1 month to go to so many of these Shripats and take the dust and pray there. And then at the end of that, then comes the 1 week or so, depending on how we do it in 5 days because there's such big, huge numbers. But mostly they go like day by day to the different islands. 9 islands. So now, Mahaprabhu, the father of Sankirtan, gave his adopted son Raghunandan Thakur the authority. So this is his adopted son. So Mahaprabhu considered him like his own son, right? And he gave this Raghunandan Thakur the authority to offer the garland on the day before the Sankirtan Yajna, which is called Adivas. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri. So he gave this seva to Raghunandan to offer the garland on the day before the Sankirtan Yajna, which is called the Adivas, and then to make the final offering at the Yajna's end. So Raghunandan Thakur also would accompany the Bengali devotees to Puri every year at Chaturmasya. He would dance with his uncle, Narahari, at the Rath Yatra festival, in the group formed by the residents of Sri Khanda. This is what I was saying before. So that place, very important, because there were 2 villages, from 2 or 3 villages, from which the associates of Mahaprabhu came, and they each had their own kirtan party. There were 7 kirtan parties. 4 of them were directly formed by Mahaprabhu, and the other 3 were formed by the people, by the great devotees from these villages, these 3 places. So, Raghunandan Thakur also participated in the Keturi festival organized by Narottam Das Thakur at Gadadhar Das's festival in Katha, and at the commemorative festival for Narahari Sarkar Thakur in Sri Khanda. So there's 3 different festivals being mentioned here. Very, very great events after the disappearance of Mahaprabhu. So one of them is called the Keturi festival, organized by Narottam Das Thakur. So the Keturi festival is so famous because it's the first observance of Gaur Purnima after the disappearance of Mahaprabhu. Quite some years after. Because all the devotees, they could not tolerate the separation of Mahaprabhu. So they were all the associates of Mahaprabhu who were still living. They were just living in this deep separation mood that Mahaprabhu had already left the planet. But when Narottam Das Thakur came from Vrindavan with all the books of the 6 Goswamis, and also Srinivasacharya and Shyamananda Prabhu, so they each went to various places preaching. And Narottam Das Thakur, he organized this festival in his village, which was his original village, Keturi Gram. And, it was a very vivid and detailed description of that wonderful event. You can read it in various places, all describing how Janava Devi, who is the direct potency of Lord Nityananda, she still stayed on the planet long time after Lord Nityananda left, and she became the leader of all the Vaishnavas. So Janava Devi and so many of the great Vaishnavas who were still living at that time, they all came. And then there's a famous Kirtan festival that Narottam Das Thakur organized on the appearance day of Mahaprabhu. And in that festival, he was singing in the middle of the congregation of all the devotees. And his style of singing and his style of kirtan that he had developed was so heartrending. And all of the associates who were there was a few hundred associates still living on the planet. They were elderly. And so they all were there in that kirtan. And when Narottam Das Thakur was singing, he was expressing such intense moods of separation from Mahaprabhu. And all the Vaishnavas were weeping and weeping. And suddenly, what happened? Mahaprabhu himself appeared with Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya, Panchatattva, and other associates. And in the middle of this assembly, he began kirtan and dancing. And when that happened, all the Vaishnavas just drowned in more praying.
This
And
was
after,
the first time they had this festival?
it's the first time that all of the associates who were still living came together to observe this festival. Yes. Yeah. And then after that, after Mahaprabhu appeared, then after some time, again, he disappeared. The whole vision disappeared. And all the Vaishnavas were drowned. Such separation is inconceivable to us.
There was a story, a separate story, but same kind of concept where we were talking about, I think it was Raghunath Das, where they were having the Chet Rice Festival, and the Mahaprabhu also came, and everybody had divine vision.
That's while Mahaprabhu was still living as a sannyasi in Puri, and Nityananda Prabhu was calling him to come for that. Yes, that Chiradahi festival at Panihati. So anyway, it's being told here that there were 3 separate festivals in which Raghunandan Thakur also took part. Keturi festival that I just described of Narottam Das Thakur. Another is Gadadhar Das's festival in Katha. I don't know that much about these festivals. And also the commemorative festival for Narahari Sarkar Thakur in Srikanda. So there's a quote here from the Bhakti Ratnakar which says, some people said, quote, anyone who is dear to Raghunandan will win Mahaprabhu's mercy for life after life. And others said, quote, Raghunandan is so merciful that he gives life to the most humble and fallen. And then some others said, quote, what humility! There is no one who is his equal. And others said, he is as beautiful as Kandarpa himself. Kandarpa means Cupid. So that's a quote. So Srila Raghunandan Thakur had great affection for Srinivas Acharya. So who is Srinivas Acharya?
Narada Muni.
No.
No.
This is the Srinivas Acharya who is the associate of Narottam and Shamananda.
Oh, okay.
That's Srinivas.
Okay.
There are 2 Srinivases. Yes.
Okay.
So that Srinivas Acharya, who was slightly from another generation, but Raghunandan Thakur, while he was still living, he had very great affection for Srinivas Acharya. So prior to his disappearance, he consoled Srinivas that despite the difficult times, he would be able to spread Vaishnavism in the future. Now this is a very important section of this biography, because it's describing here that Raghunandan Thakur was telling to Srinivas Acharya, who was the second wave along with Narottam Das Thakur and Shyamananda, that there are difficult times coming in the Kali Yuga. And that despite this, he gave this blessing to Srinivasacharya that he would be able to spread Vaishnavism everywhere in the future. So here's the quote. A difficult time is coming in which people will succumb to various doubts, Narahari Prabhu wrote in his Krishna Bhajanamrita. So this is the actual quote from his book. So who is Narahari? He is this personality who is the older brother of the father of Raghunandan Thakur. So he wrote a book called Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita. And I remember that this book came out sometime in the 80s. And ISKCON really latched onto this book at that time. I've never seen a direct copy translation of it. It's not very long, the book, but it has many, many important instructions in that book. So, here's a quote from the book. Krishna Chaitanya Chandrena Nityanandena Samhrite Avatare Kalavasmin Vaishnava Sarva Evahi Bhavishyami Sadodvigna Kale Kali Dine Dine Praya Sandigda Hridaya Uttam Ektara Madhyama. So the translation from that book. Once our Lord Krishna Chaitanya and his companion Nityananda Prabhu have ended their incarnation, then the Vaishnavas will be anxious with every passing day. This is his prediction. Whether very advanced, or somewhat advanced, or neophyte, their hearts will nearly always be filled with doubt. But don't let this worry you. Lord Gauranga will accomplish many great works through you. So this is Raghunandan Thakur telling this to Srinivasacharya. Don't let this worry you. Lord Gauranga will accomplish many great works through you. I bless you that you remain long on this earth, and that you and your followers protect our Lord's religion. Those who are opposed to devotion to Krishna, they will become devotees by your influence, and they will take shelter of you. So that is the quote from the Bhakti Ratnakara. There's two different quotes here. So, Raghunandan Thakur bequeathed the service of his Gaur Gopal deity to his son, who is named Kanai Thakur. And then he left this world on the 4th day of the waxing moon in the month of Shravan. Kanai Thakur gave a feast as part of his father's last rites. And this is the final quote in this section from Bhakti Ratnakara, that Raghunandan slowly became hidden to mortal eyes while repeating again and again the names of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. How glorious is that day of Shravan Shukla Chaturthi. Who will not sing the glories of Raghunandan Thakur? So, this is that personality.
Any photographs?
No.
Too far back.
Yeah, or any renderings? I mean, I know there's some renderings.
No, I haven't seen any photos, but maybe they exist.
I mean,
Could be.
he's more beautiful than like Cupid.
Yeah.
I mean,
He is Cupid.
Yes.
More beautiful than himself.
Yeah. So all glories to Sri Raghunandan Thakur ki jai. Tirubhav Mahamahotsav Titi Raghunandan Thakur ki jai. So the other personality whose disappearance day it is today is Vamshi Das Babaji Maharaj. You've heard of him before?
I don't know much about him, I've heard.
Yes. So he has a section, Srila Bhakti Balbatirtha Maharaj has a section. All right, so now this article about Srila Vamshidas Babaji has been written on the basis of other articles which previously appeared in the old Gaudiya magazine. That was the magazine that Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was regularly publishing. And this article is also based upon various statements made by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur and his disciples who knew Vamshidas Babaji personally. So he's living during the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So he was a Paramahansa Avaduta. We'll hear about this. Srila Vamsidas Babaji appeared in the village of Majidapur in the Jamalpur district of Bangladesh, near the city of Jamalpur. So before the partition of India, this city was formerly in the district of Mymensingh. I've been there to Mymensingh in Bangladesh. And according to Haridas Das, his father's name was Sanatan Malo Brahma, and he was previously known as Bhairava. So this Vamshidas Babaji Maharaj came to Navadvip from East Bengal. He was a Paramahansa Vaishnava who acted in the manner of an Avaduta. The word Avaduta, you know that Lord Nityananda is also called Nityananda Avadut, and some other persons. What is the meaning? The word Avaduta refers to one who has shaken off from himself all worldly feeling and obligation. Not identifying with this at all. He does not care for social conventions, particularly the Varnashram Dharma. He is quite eccentric in his behavior. Nityananda Prabhu is often characterized as an Avaduta. So, this Vamshidas Babaji, he lived there in Navadvip on the banks of the Ganges underneath a tree. And he was demonstrating a very high standard of renunciation. So, this is the same time period when Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj is also there. And also, a little earlier, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. Very exalted personalities. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur was attracted by his Vaishnava behavior and by his disregard for the rules and the regulations of society at large in the fashion of a Paramahansa Avaduta. So he himself, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he himself paid his obeisances to Babaji Maharaj from a distance, but he did not allow his disciples to associate with him. For even though Babaji Maharaj was a Paramahansa Vaishnava, an ordinary beginner in devotional practice would likely misunderstand his indifference to the rules and the regulations and end up committing offenses at his feet. The primary purpose of the rules and the regulations is to bring pleasure to Sri Sri Radha and Govinda. A practitioner who has not yet overcome his mundane conditioning, he may very well judge an advanced Vaishnava according to rules and regulations which were designed to help him advance to the next level of spiritual realization. If he measures a perfected soul by the standards which have been set for the beginner, there is a possibility of committing offenses, which could result in fall down from the devotional path. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not allow his disciples to go near to him. It is said that Babaji Maharaj had 2 cloth bags. He kept his Nitai Gaur deities in one, Radha Govinda in the other. He regularly worshipped them, taking them out of the bags and serving them mentally with mantras. And then, when he had finished, he would place the deities back in the bags. On occasion, he would leave them outside the bags so that people could look at them, his deities.
We were just speaking about somebody that was also had a bag. Was it?
That's Lokanath Goswami,
Lokanath Goswami,
who
that's
made
right.
for his
Yeah.
Radha Vinod deity. Yes. But Lokanath Goswami was not acting as an avadut like Vamshidas Babaji.
If I can do that.
Yeah.
Sajan
No.
Maharaj.
What?
I just meant, remember Sajan Maharaj? Gorgadathar deities? Sajan Maharaj
Yeah,
or Sajan Maharaj?
right.
He has his little bag of Gorgadathar. In honor, maybe.
So now, so on occasion he would leave his deities outside the bags so that people could look at them. Once in a while, he would put tobacco in a hookah and offer it to Radha and Govinda from a distance, but not to Nitai Gauranga. And people would come with offerings of rice, fruits, vegetables, flour, bananas, etc. But Babaji Maharaj would ignore them. When he noticed an accumulation of these offerings, his deities, and then distribute them to whomever happened to be present. What person could understand this kind of behavior? Babaji Maharaj only wore a kopin, a strip of cloth covering his private parts. You know, we have a photo of him. You've seen that photo? Very powerful. Very powerful. His eyes.
Where do you see that?
Well, even if we Googled it, you can find it immediately.
There's a little
probably.
book.
There's a small book that was actually
I think it's in
made by one
Was it Bhakti Vikash?
Vikas Swami.
It's in the library here.
Oh, okay,
I've seen it.
okay. So he wore a kopin, a strip of cloth covering his private parts. He left his hair and beard uncut and unkept. Yet he was tall enough to be able to pick fruits for his puja from high branches in a tree without making use of ladders or other paraphernalia. He's quite tall. On one occasion, he fell from the tree. On one occasion, he fell from the tree, and from that time on, he took on the guise of a lame person, walking with a limp. So, there's a section is titled Babaji Maharaj's Voyage to Vraja. Babaji Maharaj did not stay exclusively in the Navadvip area, but he traveled to many holy places where he also practiced the spiritual disciplines of Bhakti Yoga. He embodied the verse Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. And wherever he went, he always remained immersed in the ocean of Krishna Rasa. Therefore, everything reminded him of Krishna Lila, but especially the peepal tree or bata. Whenever he saw a peepal tree, he would sit under it, taking it to be the Vamshivat, under which Krishna played his flute to attract the gopis. Once he had installed himself there, it would be very difficult to get him to move. On the 12th of Falgun, in 1347, this is equivalent to 1941, Monday, February 24th, 1941. So he lived even into the 1940s. Wow. So on that day, Vamshidas left Navadvip city and headed for Vrindavan. He sometimes walked, sometimes he traveled by ox cart, sometimes by rail. He first went to Katha, same place we were talking about before, the place where Mahaprabhu took sannyas. He first went to Katha, where he stayed for 2 days under a butta tree near the train station. Then he took the train to Bhagalpur, where he stayed for 1 day under a butta tree near the station, and for 4 days by the Ganga. Then he traveled on to Gaya, where he remained on the banks of the Falgu River for 3 days. He also stayed on a boat in the Ganga near Dashashvamedha Ghat in Benares in Varanasi for 3 days, and spent another 3 days in Ayodhya by the Sarayu river, including 3 hours under a butta tree at the Triveni confluence at Prayag for 10 days, 2 days at the Vishram Ghat in Mathura, 8 days at the Vamshivat in Vrindavan, 9 days at the Madhya Chura on the banks of the Yamuna, 1 day at the Govindaji temple, 2 days at Kaliya Daha, 8 days under a tamal tree on the east bank of Surya Kund, at Nandagram, 2 days at Pavan Sarovara, 4 days at the foot of a pilu tree, and then another 9 days at Vamshivat Ghat in Vrindavan. Everywhere that he went, he remained absorbed in chanting the holy names and meditating on Krishna's form and pastimes. After 3 months, he returned to Navadvip Dham in the month of Jeshta. Now those who traveled with him, you might be wondering, how do they know that he was in all these places? Of course you're going to be thinking that. Anyone is going to think that, like, who was with him that wrote all this down? So those, in that book, it describes that there were a number of devotees who would come. He wouldn't even pay any attention to them.
Oh, they would just travel with them.
They would they put up a tent, and then they would take it down, and then he would just suddenly leave, and they'd put everything, and then they'd go along with him. So those who traveled with him recounted that when he was wandering through Brajamandala, he would sometimes sing songs about Krishna's Leela, sometimes glorify Navadvip Dham, and sometimes laugh madly. Sometimes he would babble incoherently, and oftentimes he would remain completely silent. So when visiting a temple, he was often seen muttering confidentially to the deities, disclosing some personal sentiment to them. All in all, his companions were charmed by his devotional absorption. In the old Gaudiya Weekly magazine, further accounts of Babaji Maharaj's travels are given, and it is stated there, in the 4 years from March 1943, he traveled to Ambika Kalna, Kharagpur, Baleshwar, Soro, Badrak, Kurda Road, and Purushottam, means Puri. Afterwards, he again visited Gaya, Kashi, Saidpur, Patna, Munger, etc. And after traveling to all these places, some devotees from his birthplace in Majidapur invited him to come for a visit. He acquiesced to their enthusiasm, but he found little pleasure in going. He said that it was a place which the Pandavas had neglected. So here's a story now from Sripad Bhaktivedanta Madhav Maharaj about Vamshidas Babaji, who was, of course, living at that time. So the founding Acharya of the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math, my spiritual master, Nityalila Pravishno Vishnupad Srimad Bhaktivedanta Madhav Goswami Maharaj, he told a story about Vamshidas Babaji from time to time. Gurudev founded an ashram, the Shamananda Gaudiya Math in Midnapur city, with the help of 2 of his godbrothers, His Holiness Bhakti Vichar Yajavar Maharaj and His Holiness Bhakti Kumud Santa Maharaj. On one occasion, Babaji Maharaj was traveling and passed through Midnapur. When Gurudev received the news that Babaji Maharaj was coming by ox cart with a group of devotees, he immediately sent a disciple to invite him to visit the mutt. Babaji Maharaj promised the disciple that he would come, and so Gurudev started to make preparations to receive the party of pilgrims. However, after the midday offering and arti, Srila Gurudev waited for some time and no one from Vamshidas's party came. Finally, Gurudev took a number of his disciples and went to find him. When Vamshidas had entered the city with his party, he had seen a peepal tree and had taken it to be Vamshivat. Remember what we heard about his relationship with the peepal trees? that once he put himself there, it was very difficult to make him move. So he had camped there, and he made arrangements for making an offering to his deities and feeding his party there. So when he saw Gurudev, Babaji Maharaj remembered his affection for Srila Prabhupada. And he offered him some sweet rice prasad, which Gurudev accepted respectfully. I often heard Gurudev say how delicious the sweet rice tasted that day. Now there's also a reminiscence by His Holiness Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. My Siksha Guru, His Holiness Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, has told a few anecdotes about Vamshidas Babaji based on his eyewitness account. Quote, at Babaji Maharaj's cottage by the Ganga, a pile of fruit intended for the service of the deities had accumulated once, and Baba would not let anyone lay a finger on it. One day, however, a cow entered the cottage and ate all the fruits. Babaji Maharaj watched and laughed, clapping his hands. I can't remember now whether Babaji's disciple's name was Purna or Punya. Anyhow, I asked him out of curiosity why Baba was laughing. And then he said, last night, a thief stole all the deities' pots and pans, his dishes and utensils. Now a cow has come and eaten all the fruit. So Baba is beside himself with joy, and he is laughing and saying, one thief gives and another thief takes away. Now no one was able to drive the cow away. The supreme thief is Krishna. So this is a footnote that according to Haridas Das, who's also a historian of the Vaishnavas, Vamshidas Babaji never locked his doors, even though he was asked to do so by his well-wishers. So thus, he was regularly robbed. And when asked why he didn't lock his doors, he only said that it was Gaur Nitai's responsibility. And it was their house and their possessions that were stolen. Sometimes he would chastise the deities for not stopping the thieves when he found that the pots or the foodstuffs had been stolen. Babaji Maharaj, Srila Puri Maharaj is continuing. Babaji Maharaj never allowed anyone to touch his feet. But on the day after one Falgun Purnima, when everyone remembered Jagannath Mishra's celebration of Gauranga's birth, Babaji Maharaj was so ecstatic that he forgot his rule and he became as generous as a desire tree. So on that day, I was fortunate enough to get the dust of his lotus feet. I also had the good fortune to get his prasadi leftovers one day. Babaji Maharaj enjoyed hearing devotional songs. One day he heard Bhaktivinoda Thakur's couplet, Tyajiya Shayana Sukha Vichitra Palanka, Kabe Vrajar Dhulai Dusara Habe Anga. When will I give up the pleasure of sleeping in a comfortable bed and roll in the dust of Vrindavan? And Babaji Maharaj said when he heard this, you are only singing a song. For someone who has exploded, it has exploded. In other words, we only sing the songs of the Mahajans, but we feel no emotion. When the dust of the holy places covers our bodies, we only think of brushing it off. We have no real idea of its value. Then Puri Maharaj says, we have heard that Vamshi Das took Vesha, that means Babaji Vesh, from our Param Gurudev, Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. One day someone started singing one of these newfangled, invented mantras that contradict Siddhanta and divine sentiment. And Babaji Maharaj said, that name is not allowed here. One gentleman often came to visit Babaji Maharaj, and he kept asking him for his mercy. So one day, Baba finally became impatient, and he took off his kopin and handed it to the gentleman and said, "You want mercy? Here it is, take it." Then the visitor was frightened by the manner in which Baba challenged him. We have heard that all perfections come from the grace of the Vaishnavas, but we have not got the sincerity necessary to really take their blessings when they are given. What is the use of repeatedly saying, "Be merciful, be merciful"? We had an elderly godbrother named Gokul Das Babaji. His family home was not far from that of Babaji Maharaj. So Gokul Das Baba went frequently to see Vamshi Das Baba. And when they got together, they would joyfully converse about Krishna in their Maimansingh dialect from East Bengal. They have their own dialect. So here's the section. Let me just check here. Yeah, this is the end of it now. This is short. Here's the section of Vamshi Das's teachings. Babaji Maharaj was normally occupied with his devotional activities, so he minded his own business and he spoke very little. Many people would come to him. Often they would ask him questions. If he took notice at all, he would sometimes answer indirectly, but mostly he remained silent. He would be observed talking to the deities, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying desperately. If he did give spiritual instruction, then he would rarely cite scripture, but he always spoke from his personal realization. In 2 or 3 short phrases, he was often able to make a deep impression on the listener. Once, he had a regular visitor who kept asking him, "How can we attain God?" So Babaji Maharaj just remained silent, giving no answer to the questioner. And one day, he suddenly looked at this visitor and he asked him, "What do you want?" The fellow replied, "I want to find God." And Babaji Maharaj answered in one word, "Cry." Those who visited him reported the short answers that he gave to their questions. Some of these were noted and they are given here. Question: "Baba, what should we do?" Answer: "If you worship Nitai, you will get Gaur. All your unhappiness will disappear, and you will experience the beginnings of real joy." Question: how can one become free from the demands of the senses? Answer: Shuniya Govinda Rab, Apani Palabe Sab, Singha Rabe Jata Korigan. This is a line from Narottam Das Thakur's song. This is his answer. It means, how can we become free from the demands of the senses? They will all flee at the sound of Govinda's name, just as the deer flee at the sound of the lion's roar. Question: Baba, you find no happiness in this world? You find no happiness in this world, Baba? Answer: there is no joy here unless you worship Gaur Nitai. That is our eternal world, while this illusion is your world. Your happiness in this world is like the laughing or the crying of a dreaming baby. Question: how can we recognize the blessings of Krishna or the Vaishnavas? Blessings of Krishna, blessings of the Vaishnava. How can we recognize the blessings? Answer: Jai kore tomar ash, tare koro sarvanash. You ruin everything for someone who aspires to attain you. Now this is a song. It doesn't say which song. But what he's telling here are these lines, and this is what he told. So we're reading the line that he told, and we're reading the translation. What's the question?
How can we recognize the blessings of the Vaishnavas?
And Krishna.
And Krishna.
Jai Kori Tomar Ash Tare Koro Sarvanash. You ruin everything for someone who aspires to attain you. So who's he talking to? Kaha ke o takade, kaharo takane. To someone he gives wealth, while others are penniless. Tomastani aparadi nahi paritran. There is no pardon for an offense at the Vaishnava's lotus feet. How can you stop it? Who will deliver you? Who will understand me if I try to explain? I haven't got the slightest bit of attachment to the Vaishnavas. This is his answer. Question. How will I attain Krishna's mercy? Answer. If you cry, you will get his mercy. Who cries? If you cry with tears of love, you will get the Lord's mercy. Mukke boli hari, kaje anya kari, prema vari, chakle elona. This means, I recite the names of Hari, but I act otherwise. So the tears of love do not well up in my eyes. Question. How can we be happy? In renunciation or in enjoyment? In either situation, how can we be happy? Answer. There are saintly persons on the Sarayu who chant the names of Sitaram. They are happy. They know no distress. Those who stay with King Duryodhana, they do not know any joy. Duryodhana. Those who are with Yudhishthira, they're happy. Happiness and distress are brothers. Enjoyment and renunciation. Some people enjoy and some renounce. Question. Have you ever been to Mayapur? Answer. Yes. Some call it Mayapur. Some call it Navadvip. There is buildings all over the Mayapur temple site, and the deity is worshipped under a neem tree. I once went to Mayapur with a torn wrapper and a water pot. Sachinandan Gosai, Mahaprabhu, came and he took my water pot. I sat down and waited, and a few minutes later, Sachinandan Gosai came and gave it back. Then I came back here. What's he telling? That he personally met Mahaprabhu there at his birthplace and had this exchange with him.
Made an offering to him.
Yes, and then he gave it back. So, Babaji Maharaj's disappearance day was on the Shukla Chaturthi of Shravan, which is today. Gaur Premanandi. Srila Vamshidas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Srila Vamshidas Babaji Tirubhav Mahamahotsav Titi ki jai. Shri Raghunandan Thakur Tirubhav Mahamahotsav Titi ki jai. Shri Gaura Parshada Vrinda ki Guru Varga ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Vansha Kalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vedacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo.
Shri Gurudev ki jai.
Shri Gaur Arti Radha Krishna Jugal Arti ki jai.
You're welcome back.